We're here at Greenwich. I'm here with Iain Sinclair, and it's a walk called Refugee Tales. What's it about, Iain?
Refugee Tales is the inspiration of various people at the University of Kent in Canterbury, and the idea is to connect up with detainees and refugees and economic migrants of various sorts, and to conduct a walk over several days that will finish up in Westminster today. So they've been coming along the Thames. They came up from Rochester onto the Thames. They came through Gravesend and then on last night into Greenwich. And this is the last leg from Greenwich to Westminster. And each day I think different writers connect up and tell their stories or the stories of people they've met on the journey, alongside stories from one of the refugees themselves. And they try and engage the local people wherever they are with their stories and what's happening, and try and involve them. And so we're just setting off for the final day's walk, and I'm going to do some talking myself in Rotherhithe.
David, can you tell me about Refugee Tales?
So Refugee Tales, it's a walk in solidarity with refugees, asylum seekers and detainees. And last year we walked from Dover to Crawley via Canterbury, and everywhere we stopped we told two tales. One was the tale of somebody who'd sought asylum in the UK, and typically people who had been detained, and then the other was the tale of somebody who had worked with people who had been detained, for instance the lawyer's tale or the visitor's tale. And this year we're reprising the whole thing, but we're taking a different route. So we started in Canterbury, and then we walked up to the Thames via Rochester, then we came in through Gravesend and Dartford, and we're ending in Westminster. So, and we're telling tales, a whole new set of tales as we go. And what we're drawing attention to is the fact that the UK is the only country in Europe that detains people who've sought asylum indefinitely. In theory, pending removal, but in practice for 2, 3, 4 years, sometimes up to as many as 9 years. So, and it's really what the project is doing is it's calling for an end to indefinite detention.
What's been the response now in the light of Brexit? And when you pass through places like Gravesend, how have people responded to people wearing refugee tails?
There's been a sense of hostility. I mean, people have looked at us and wondered what it is, and they haven't liked the fact that there is this kind of very diverse group of people walking through the town. Those places they look very solidly Brexit because they have all the iconography of it. So there's the Union Jacks and the crosses of St George. When we've actually got into the readings, the people who have come along have been they've been interested and informed. But we have sensed that we've been walking through a territory which is not exactly sympathetic to what it is that we're doing. But that is why we're walking through it, so straightforwardly. Yeah. What we're finding is that people do actually want to hear the tales that these people have to tell on a very human level.
On a theoretical level.
Exactly. No. And the real question that we've been having discussions and fora as we've been going along, and the real question is, how do you scale that up? How do you get from the fact that on a one-to-one level a person is interested in another person's story to something that might constitute a humane policy? That's a really difficult question, I think.
Because a lot of it is not to do with actually knowing or meeting or involving yourself with the people. Yeah. And when you do, it changes. Yeah. It's to do with this spectre that's drummed up by the media and so on of these that horrendous Farage poster. Yeah. Those kind of images that play on you, and the tabloids that whip you up. Yeah. It's not to do with when you actually meet people and hear their stories.
So we had a really interesting conversation around the Immigration Act, and the Immigration Act sets out explicitly to create a hostile environment for people coming into the country, what they call illegal migrants, but let's just call them people who move. And everything about that act is about distancing, and particularly what it's about is distancing people from the language itself. So we're trying to cut people out of the language. So all this project is trying to do is kind of bring some of those stories back into the language. Exactly.
By involving writers with people telling their own stories.
And there's a kind of solidarity that comes out of that. So yeah, that's the plan anyway. When a person goes to a bail hearing, or they don't actually attend the court, they attend the court via a video link, which is immediately distancing them. And then the bail hearing, like the deportation appeal hearing, is not a court of record. So there's no actual official trace of this person ever having really been in the country. And so a person could live here for 10 years and never quite actually be in the language. It's really it's systemic for sure.
Have people who've been through that process been giving their witness to it on this walk?
So we opened with a forum at the University of Kent, and the opening keynote was a guy who's been, well, as he said right at the beginning, he said, "I have been detained in every detention centre in the UK, and over a period of about 10 years." And he just, and then he gave his story. This is a guy who was trafficked out of Ghana. So but on any human level, his case is cut and dried, except that everywhere he runs into some detail that means that the case will not be settled. So, yeah.
What's the position now?
In policy-wise, you mean?
No, with him now.
Oh, with him, he's in suspense. I mean, he's one of the many people in that position, but a number of people on this walk who are just in a state of limbo. So what limbo means is they're living on £35 a week in central London, but they don't even, this is another form of exclusion, they don't even get that £35 a week in cash. They get it on a card, which is called the Azure card, and the card, it prescribes which shops you can go to and which items you can buy. And one of the things that it doesn't entitle you to do is it doesn't entitle you to use public transport. It's unbelievable. Yeah.
This is like the worst excesses of these frontier towns where the mining bosses, control the shops and the bars and everything else, and you could only buy through them. This seems to be what's happening.
Yeah. I mean, they, as is the case with legislation around immigration, what they do is they trial it on immigrants and then they roll it out elsewhere. So that card thing, they're rolling that out into people looking on social security benefit at the moment, just like working out who it is that actually makes the list of things that your person is entitled to buy. I don't know. Maybe that's Theresa May herself.
Public transport, because how you basically you're not allowed to move around.
No, they're not allowed to move around. So they really can't. And even when a person who is in this limbo for easily often a decade, because the thing is they even if they wanted to, and even if the government wanted them to, which sometimes they do obviously, they can't be sent back because the place that they would be sent back to is war torn or in conflict or it's collapsed in some way. You couldn't get the paperwork to go back, so they're here for that period of time. But during that period of time, they have to sign on at a Home Office reporting centre once a week, once a fortnight, once a month, depending on the terms of their bail. And even on those days, they don't have the cash to make the journey, so they have to walk to the reporting centre, which can sometimes be a matter of miles. So, and this is all in the name of producing an environment that is so hostile to people seeking asylum that people will no longer do it. That's the plan.
On another tack, this is where Christopher Marlowe was stabbed.
Oh, is it?
And this is where he's buried.
Okay.
So a pub garden on the riverfront here.
That's a good Canterbury connection.
There's a Canterbury connection, yeah. He came from Canterbury, didn't he?
Yeah, he did.
He became involved with the intelligence community.
Yeah.
And this could have been a kind of a judicial hit.
Yeah.
Anyway, there's a very nice graveyard nearby, and there he lies,
Right.
unremarked.
Have you walked all the way from Canterbury?
Yes, I walked most of the way. I also had one day's cooking because there's important cooking crew.
Absolutely essential, I can tell you. The cooking has been amazing. Yes, and I've walked all the way. How have you found the experience? Fantastic. It's been lovely following the river and its changing faces, appearances, and going through different landscapes and appreciating that.
And it's also the comradeship. It's been wonderful. There's 120 people walking today, and we've had sort of over 70 every day, people from all walks of life, and also ex-detainees who get a chance to see the English countryside for the very first time and sort of communicate with people who are friendly with them and understand their situation. And that's really why we're walking. We're walking against indefinite detention, because Britain is the only country in the EU that has indefinite detention. You can be detained 1 month, 1 year, 4 years, whereas in Europe all the countries have very fixed limits. For example, Germany has 28 days, so that means that solicitors and immigration officials have to work, have to do their job quicker than they do in the UK, certainly.
And I think the other thing to say is that the walk brings out the ability for people to express themselves while you're walking. You do a lot of talking.
Yes, a lot of talking.
So it's nice to talk, and
Yes.
it's unthreatening in a way. Instead
Yes,
of being eye contact,
totally.
You're
Yes.
just wandering along, and it's
Chatting.
amazing how generous some of our guests have been with their own experiences.
Their stories, yes.
Welcome to the eighth wonder of the world. You're standing directly above the first tunnel under a river anywhere in the world, and built, by the way, by a famous refugee.
Last year, we were extremely fortunate that Iain Sinclair joined our walk, and he addressed us in the fantastically named Dirty Habit pub in Hollingbourne.
That's right.
Which was a wonderful event. But this is even more special in a sense, because Iain is definitely now on home turf and home territory. So Iain, as you know, is one of the great contemporary chroniclers of London. And he was reminding me, and then I was remembering that in his novel Down River, he addresses precisely this territory. Down River is a kind of, it's set in Thatcherite Britain, and it's a kind of semi-fantasy. It's a semi-fantasy in the sense that some of the worst excesses of Down River, which were kind of imagined to be imagined, have actually come true. We probably need a kind of post-Brexit Down River, is my feeling. Anyway, please welcome Iain Sinclair. Thank you very much.
Oh, it's a real privilege to reconnect with this, because I did it last year, and it was in a pub car park, and it was off the Pilgrim's track, and you got a sense of how important this thing of walking, the pilgrimage, the group of people that come together, that move off with a common purpose across a landscape, engage in whatever way with the people who live in that landscape, challenge their prejudices, show them things they don't know about, and actually make something change. Just out there on the river, you go back to King Edward I deciding that he is going to expel the Jewish community from England, who had in fact come in with William the Conqueror, that these people are dismissed. They're first of all prohibited, then dismissed. And legend has it of a sea captain going out, leaving members of the ship's company and leaving the cargo, as these people were, on a sandbank to drown while they sail off. So those kind of bitter images of a certain kind of Englishness are there from the very beginning. In the churchyard across there, you may have noticed this big tomb to Prince Lee Boo. And that is one of these exotic stories of London that people don't really notice. This is in the 1780s. Captain Wilson out in the island of Kururah gathers up the king's son, the prince, a repack, and his name is on the streets here. Brings him back to London, leaving behind a cabin boy, a member of the ship's company called Madden Blanchard, leaves him on the Pacific Island, brings Prince Lee Boo into London, and London is fascinated by this man. He attends operations in St. Thomas's Hospital, he attends firework parties, he uses a telescope, he's amazed by it, but yet he dies. He can't survive the viral environment, the diseases that are in London, and very soon the nature of being in London and the nature of remembering home finishes his life, and there he is represented. But he's important. It's important that you notice those people. You notice further downriver yesterday the walk came through Gravesend, where I believe there was a certain amount of resistance to the idea of a Refugee's Tale march. Pocahontas, who was there, Native American princess, was also brought to London to the Stuart court and was a tremendous success and did not want to go back. She wanted to stay but was pushed into going back and dies on board the ship at Gravesend and is brought ashore and is buried. So that the river becomes a series of memorials to the more exotic stories that have kept London alive. And the realization, we passed a mulberry tree, the silk industry of London. This is the Huguenots. The Huguenots arrive and settle across the river on the other side in Whitechapel, invigorating the cultural, industrial, social life of that area, making beautiful houses that are now very desirable. When that community moves on, fades away, becomes integrated in other ways, then you get the Jewish pogroms and you get the flood of people coming in from Poland and Russia. These are political imperatives. This happens all the time. And in the past, despite London's prejudices, all of these communities of outsiders who come in have been absorbed. London, we're all outsiders, and we're all based on that river. That river is the kind of great birth canal of London. Everything depends on it. Everything comes out of that sediment. We can't allow it to become simply gigantic, soulless, generic corporate development. We can't allow all the public space to become privatized. We can't let that happen without registering it. We can't let the stories of people who've come here because of completely difficult or damaged or impossible circumstances simply to be hidden away, to be only allowed to have a card that lets them buy materials in certain shops. This is like the worst aspects of the frontier life. You know, when you were taking the only work that was possible in the far west in America, and you were only able to buy from the company shop. The control of economics is the control of your whole life. The fact you can't use public transport, you can't become part, you become a kind of invisible. And at this moment, all of this is up for debate. We've got the Chilcot report coming out to demonstrate the absurdity of that invasion and all the damage that came out of it. We've had a badly botched and organized decision to come out of Europe. I mean, you can't take that decision when almost 50% of the people don't want it. It's creating a huge division and a split. The political figures who come in and made their careers on various are falling like ninepins all around us. Nobody knows where it's at. And so therefore, everything is going to depend in the end in two ways, I think, on the formation of communities, on the decision that people will respect their localities. They will find out what the history is, that the setting off of the Mayflower from here, the going off across the unknown vastness of that ocean to form a new community is not unlike going into space. We were talking about that before. It's the same thing. Same kind of risks are involved. And anybody who takes that doesn't do it lightly. It's a huge and difficult thing. And hopefully, as the day evolves, those questions will be debated and discussed. But not only that, they'll be celebrated, because a lot of the people here and a lot of the impetus that's behind it is of poetry, is of language. Language is the most important resource, that we can share these languages, we can share the stories, and as we move across the landscape, it yields up its stories to us. They shouldn't be imposed by developers from above who tell you what to look at. They should be what you have found yourself as you move, as you come into a pub, as you sit down for a drink, as you talk to somebody in a church, as you move through. There are the stories. There becomes a city. There becomes a book. And I think at the end of this will be a book, and it will change something. You know, just walking always changes something. There's nothing that will change your idea of a city than spending a day walking through it. It won't do to to just use the guidebook and do the official walk. You have to go off-piste. You have to let go all of your reflexes and go with the drift. And I was talking to someone this morning who said they couldn't really see how they could stop walking after having come from Canterbury to London. The body has become this other entity. We are people who have this sense of migration in us. We've drifted. We were hunter-gatherers. We moved across huge spaces. It's natural to us. It's not natural to be penned. We've got to get away from the development that's all to do with permeable pathways that want to get you out of the station into the supermarket. There are other things to do. There are other ways to do it, and walking is the beginning. So I'm congratulating anybody who's done this walk, and I hope it goes on into a great event tonight and it gets the attention and brings these debates forward in a way that they need to be done. Thank you.